Thank you for joining us for Permanent Records Issues, Series Number 1, Access Restrictions. This is a records management seminar delivered by the United States National Archives and Records Administration's National Records Management Training Program. In this session, Jack Cabral and Michael Bainbridge discuss access restrictions, their importance and impact on the transfer of permanent records to the National Archives. Now, let's join the seminar.
Now I'd like to pass it over to Jeff to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Paulette. Again, this is Jeff Benson. Paulette and I are with the training group at the National Archives and Records Administration. Today's session is part of the series that the Permanent Records Capture folks are doing for us. Today's topic is an encore on access restrictions. For those of you who are familiar with the National Archives and Records Administration, you know that we have what's called the archives, the part that makes us the National Archives. And the whole purpose of having an archive is to bring in the permanent records of the federal government and make them available to researchers. Sometimes, as you will hear from Michael and Jack, sometimes it's important that the National Archives work with their customer agencies, develop any access restrictions that there might be, and they'll talk about that in this particular session. The best part about the session is that both Jack and Michael have been practitioners in records management for many, many years. They work for a lot of different organizations. Jack, for example, very much active in the state of New Jersey. He was at Rutgers University where he got his library science degree. He worked processing some congressional papers and archival collections there. He started a records management program in a large municipality in New Jersey. Eventually, he became a member of the National Archives several years ago, and now he works at the Permanent Records Capture team. So that's Jack. Michael, on the other hand, you'll be able to pick up right away, is not from New Jersey. He's from Texas. Michael is a senior records analyst here at the National Archives. Prior to coming here, if I were to read his resume, it would take the full 60 minutes, so I'm not going to do that. But a whole combination from the Houston Airport System, University of Texas Medical Branch, FEMA certified, a master continuity practitioner, tons of qualifications on Michael as well. So they're great presenters, and I think you're really going to enjoy the session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thanks, Jeff. And again, welcome everybody. Permanent Records Issues, Series Number 1. Why are we here? Well, the National Archives is an independent agency under the executive branch of government responsible for the protection and preservation of historical records. As a byproduct or product of your agency's operations, you either create or you receive records. Some records are temporary, meaning at some point in time you have legal authority to dispose of them, and some records are permanent, which means at some point in time you have a legal responsibility and in order to be compliant, an obligation to turn over those permanent records to the National Archives, where we bring them in, we process them, we put them into a preservation type environment. We make them ready for public consumption for use for historians, genealogists, researchers, what have you. However, by virtue of what we do in our various agencies, sometimes we have certain access restrictions that must go along, coincide with the nature of the records themselves. So we're going to be talking about that. Jack and I are part of the Permanent Records Capture section here with the National Archives. We have both internal and external customers. Our internal customers are going to be the people on the archive side of the house who are so desperately seeking to bring your historical records in. And then you, on the opposite side of the house, out there, customer agencies, you have permanent records, but you don't know if I can get rid of them yet. How do I get rid of them? How do I turn them over to you guys? Are there any other kind of special requirements? And what we're doing here is trying to make things just a little bit easier for both you and for us when it comes to turning over permanent records with these restrictions. So we are here to help educate you as records managers. It's about the permanent records and the issues that we at the National Archives are confronted with at the point in time when either the records are being transferred from the Federal Records Center side of the house or upon a direct offer to the National Archives. Currently, clearly, since the records are being transferred as open, that's one problem. Or, has everybody heard about FOIA? Okay, Freedom of Information Act request. Essentially, anybody in the world can request information from the federal government. And so there's certain things that we do or we create data information record-wise that not just anybody can have access to. So what we're seeing is a lot of folks and agencies, well, it's got one exclusion, it's got one exemption, I'm going to just put every provision down possibly. I'm going to cite it all. Or I'm not going to cite anything at all. So we have improper identification of classified records as well during the transfer, which is creating a backlog for the term that we use, accessioning permanent records in the archives. Accessioning essentially means bringing them in, processing them, getting them organized and ready for consumption. And then classified records are being transferred in unclassified series. And that's a security violation, and we will and do report that through the National Archives. So we have a variety of things going on here, and we're going to touch on all of those. So post 9/11, we had an increase in sensitive records being sent to the National Archives. We started looking at things a little bit differently as the federal government entities that we are. A lot of agencies have started transferring younger records. It's not just stuff that sits on the shelf for 20 or 30 years. They're offering it a little bit sooner. So after 9/11, the National Archives reconsidered what should be defined as records of concern. Personally identifiable information, addresses, phone numbers, building designs, drawings, layout of electrical grids, things along those lines. As a result, a greater percentage of incoming NARA sessions we find contain sensitivities and should not be served to the public prior to screening. Well, you know your records better than we do. You're the ones that build, design, employ the engineers. We're the historians, we're the preservationists. So identifying what records you have, understanding their sensitivities or their classifications or their restrictions is crucial on your part, because once it comes to us, we're relying upon you to tell us, what these restrictions are and potentially how long they should be in effect. So it's helping us to help you, a little life cycle. I create the record, I use the record, I'm going to box it up and make sure that it says sensitive. And then I'm going to ship it off to the record center. I've got it, and I've packed it up sensitive, and I've got it in a commercial record center, or I've got it in the archives. It's a 6-step process, and we're going to see this process built out a little bit later on. But essentially, step 2 is the standard form 135. If you go to www.archives.gov/FRC, you're going to see a PDF of a 135. Well, for those of you who are kind of old school like me, the 135 one was a hard copy, had a front and back. Electronically, it's 2 separate files. So you would find the restriction codes and classifications on the actual back of that form or in the second digital document that's posted on the website. Another thing that we're going to be looking at a little bit later on, and Jack's going to jump in and help me out with this, is we're going to look at transfer requests. Transfer requests is within the Electronic Records Archives. So we're talking about the places where you would find the restrictions, and Jack will show you where you can find the restrictions as well. So moving on, show of hands. How many have transferred classified records or access restricted records to a federal record center or to the National Archives? Did you identify them on the 135 or the transfer request appropriately? Or at least you think you did? How did you know that they were classified? So Nancy says content. Was that based upon something that the program manager told you, the project manager, somebody that the FOIA officer told you? Although, Nancy, I know you're very familiar with your records. Did you look at your retention schedule? How did you know? You didn't just wake up in the morning and poof, oh, I know. It was stamped classified by senior military personnel. Now, that's pretty indicative, okay? Family advocacy files. For the rest of you, do you put on their stamps on your folders? FOIA, with whatever the exclusion is, person's tasked? Okay. Well, let's give you some scenarios coming up. We have 3 different scenarios: the good, the bad, or the great. Bob Jones is 6 months from retirement and needs to transfer 5 boxes of permanent records to the Federal Record Center that will eventually end up at the National Archives. He's not sure exactly what's in the boxes, but was told they were confidential. Jenny, who's a coworker, created the boxes and works in the admin office, but she's on 6 months maternity leave and will not be back into the office before Bob retires. Bob decides to go ahead and fill out the 135 and check off C for confidential because he doesn't know the security classification and has nobody to ask. So he figures better safe than sorry. What else could Bob have done? Please respond in the chat box. Yes, could have talked to the general counsel, could have consulted with the National Archives, could have looked in the box, could have called Jenny, yeah, consulted with the records officer, all good answers. Okay, so what else could he have done? You've hit a lot of them right on the nail. Could have located Jenny and called her. There's nothing to, preclude calling her while she's on maternity leave. Hey, Jenny, what are these records? I'm getting ready to retire. Could have contacted his management or also contacted the classification person? Yes, especially if you have national security records. He could have searched in ARCIS. That's the Records Center platform for all your transfers, for previous records that were retired under the same disposition number. He could have been a little bit more accurate on the 135. If your records pertain to national security information, you have to complete the restrictions section on the 135, either with C for confidential, S for secret, or T for top secret. But note that the codes Q, R, or W, which are listed back on the 135, should no longer be used. If you designate a national security classification, you must also indicate whether the records are designated as Code E, restricted data or formerly restricted data. If you have questions on that, in the handout that we have, you'll have some links to some executive orders, EO 1235 and 13292. At the agency's request, federal record centers can store non-national security classified records in vault storage for an additional fee. And if there are no special restrictions on your records, you can designate code N or just leave that section blank. So we pretty much hit it really well. So the steps for properly transferring restricted records. Pre-review your transfers for the upcoming cycle in ARCIS, so you know what's in the pipeline, ready to go. The reports from the Federal Record Center account reps on holdings and future transfers or the August spreadsheet. Identify your records to be transferred using your agency record schedule. Review the accompanying or make sure that you have a box list completed or the 135. Check that the records you identified for transfer are either restricted or non-restricted by referring to your agency records officer in Washington, D.C. or wherever your headquarters is located. Talk to your agency FOIA officer. Make sure you have all the pertinent information. Are there any kind of exclusions that we need to keep in mind? Do we have any kind of pending litigation? We're also going to talk to general counsel. And if you suspect that classified records might be a part of the transfer, do a physical inspection of the boxes or sample box requests. Because once it comes to the Record Center, back in the day, we used to have vaults throughout the regional record centers. Now we only have 2 locations. So if you've got classified materials that you send in or they're commingled, and we don't know about it, and, let's pretend it's 10, 15, 20 years down the line, you're ready to do a transfer, and one of our poor little technicians, little GS2, little GS3, is walking through pulling your records out for you to help, facilitate that transfer from your agency to the National Archives. They open up the box and they see classified materials. It's like the wheels fell off the wagon. Everything comes to a complete screeching halt. They have to go through and contact ISOO. We have to go through and do a report to you guys. There may be investigations on your side, investigations on our side. So we want to make sure that we're only sending the appropriate kind of records to the Record Center. And then when you transfer the records, number 8, to the archives, in navigating an ERA, be aware of the access restrictions section. And Jack will highlight this for you in some upcoming slides. Make sure you choose the appropriate access restrictions from the drop-down menu. And when in doubt, don't guess. Just in case, for those of you who've been in some of my records management training before, it is not a retention period. And just in case is not an excuse for highlighting every single classification and or exception or exclusion or exemption. Know what your records are. Talk to the folks that create them. So another little scenario, the gray. After doing a pre-review query in ARCIS, Kathy realizes that 20 boxes of permanent records will be eligible for transfer from the Federal Records Center to the National Archives. The records are 20 years old and contain a subject-level box list that has 2 entries. Box 1, subject file, 1989. Box 2, subject file, 1990. Confident in her agency's impeccable records management program and the well-written and extensive 135, Kathy determines that the 20 boxes of records that are up for transfer do not contain classified or access-restricted information. Please type into the chat, what else could she have done? Got a couple of folks that said check the box. And yes, Nancy, only certain agencies and offices can handle national security information. Check with the owning department of the files, review the content to verify, look through the 2 boxes. Check the box list. There is no box list. Look for an inventory list. Okay, yeah. So kind of preemptively, I'm going to put a plug in. We will be having series 3. Is it 3, Jack? Box list, or is that going to be 4?
I believe that's probably going to be 4, yeah.
Okay, so forthcoming, hopefully before the end of the fiscal year, and if not before the end of the fiscal year, the new fiscal year, we will be having a free briefing on box lists for permanent records. That's the key thing, box lists, subject files. Subject file doesn't tell you anything. What if it was a bunch of personnel records? Okay, the subject is personnel records, A to Z. You don't have any idea until you go through and look at every single folder who's in there. So she should have created a folder-level box list. And she could have visited the FRC to check the boxes, or she could have had the boxes pulled back from the FRC and reviewed them at her location. Done a good, proper index, inventory, and they're ready to go. She did 2 of the key things that we're talking about for the briefing. We want to make sure that they're not classified and there are no access restrictions. But the next thing is we need to have a good detailed list of what's in the boxes. 1989, that was a good year. So was 1990. But I don't recall everything we did. And for those of you who put in, check with the program office, project office, yes. Yes, you definitely should. Okay, so access restricted records common to most agencies. Typically, your records of the head and deputy heads of the organization or agency, any kind of records containing PII, personally identifiable information. That could be name and social, name and employee number, name and phone number, home addresses, criminal civil litigation case files, general counsel, inspector general records, any kind of business or regulatory litigation, confidential business information, grant files, civilian contracts, and civilian R&D files. Is this list complete? No. This is just an example of some of the ones that we see common in most agencies that come into the National Archives. So, show of hands, how many people recognize these series types? And if you can think of any other types of classified kind of records that you may have or that might exist, go ahead and type those into the chat box real quick. Business confidential trade secret, yes. Water well information, yes. What is, okay, we live in a world of acronyms. What is EPI and PHI? Personal health information, yes. Medical, EEOC, solicitation, protected health information, yes. So there's a variety of things out there, and if you see any applicant data, yes. Anything that can associate or tie back to a specific individual, personally identifiable information. Now, there's a lot of stuff that may be aggregate, like all the people from the age 35 to 45. That probably wouldn't be personally identifiable because we're using a pool of folks from 35 to 45. Environmental protection information, okay. Cute little cartoon, here's the government. Private, go away. Yet we're trying to celebrate 30 years of access from freedom of information. Private, go away. Don't restrict everything if the restriction is not supposed to be there. Don't slap that classification on there if it's not applicable. We've all heard of open government, yes? Yes, manual time cards with Social Security numbers will be classified as personally identifiable information. Moving ahead. We've got lots of good examples out there. So let's talk real quick about some of the exemptions that we see. I don't want to put one importance over another, but the most important citations are the ones that we have highlighted in red. B1, national security information, confidential, secret, top secret, secret compartmented information, RD, FRD. Then we have internal agency rules and practices. Exempted records from disclosure by statute, talking grand jury, tax information, wiretap information. You'll see these like in the FBI, DEA, Secret Service, IRS, and most components of DOJ. The next one, B4, trade secrets and commercial or financial information. Business regulation, litigation, case files. You'll see some in EPA, the SEC, Food and Drug Administration, other regulatory agencies. B5, inter- and intra-agency memorandum. It's rarely used by the National Archives, but deliberative process privilege, attorney work product privilege, attorney-client privilege. B6, information that would invade the privacy of a living individual. Example, medical files. Some you guys already hit a bunch of these: Social Security, financial information, personnel files, any folders by surname, visa, naturalization, adoption information, home addresses if they're less than 30 years old. You'll see a lot of this within FBI, DEA, ATF, some in DOJ, Peace Corps, Inspector General, General Counsel, head of agency files, things along those lines. B7, information related to law enforcement investigations, privacy, source protection, techniques and procedures, protection of information that, you know, the release of could endanger the life of an individual. You'll find these in most of your law enforcement. You might find some in Inspector General and General Counsel. You may even find some in the Department of Education, student loan frauds. B8, information relating to financial institutions, banking information. Things in B9, geological and geophysical information relating to wells. Somebody said water wells earlier. Yes. Okay, so next scenario. After doing a pre-reviewed query in ARCIS, Matt realizes that 15 boxes of permanent records are going to be eligible to transfer from the Federal Records Center to the National Archives. He's only been on this job 6 months and not aware of the previous level of RM quality in the agency. He relies on both the permanent records box list and the 135 for information. Since the box list only goes to the subject level and not to the folder level, he can't make an accurate determination on whether the 15 boxes contain classified or sensitive records. He decides to visit the Federal Records Center, since it's located only 25 miles north of his agency, to personally review the records. Upon personal review of the 15 boxes, he determines that the records contain General Counsel and Inspector General records in addition to personally identifiable information. Matt determines to fill out the access restriction part on the transfer request, that's in ERA, using B6 and B7. So we jump back real quick. B6, info that would invade a living person's privacy, and B7, law enforcement. That sounds pretty good. But what else could Matt have done? Could have been B5, intra-agency. Make a folder title list, very good. Ask his general counsel, yes. That very first bullet, only 6 months on the job. You know, he may be a savant. He may, have every piece of knowledge that he needs to know about records management, but he's only been on the job 6 months. Yes, he needs a good box list, and he needs to talk to staff. Talk to previous staff. Ask questions, yes. He can go through and he can make some initial determinations, but ask people. Talk to the Freedom of Information Act request people. Talk to general counsel. Talk to the program people. We don't know exactly where these permanent records are, which program they came from. Asking questions is not a bad thing. Yes, it works. We want to make sure that you only cite the specific exemptions that you need to. But pretty much, Matt did a pretty good job. So best practices, again, you know your records better than we do at the National Archives. You should also know your schedule and know your access restrictions. You should have a good working relationship with your FOIA person at headquarters. And if you're not the FOIA person where you are, with the FOIA person where you are. It should be relatively easy. How many people here have file plans? Raise your hands or put yes. We have a file plan for our records. Got a thumbs up, I got a green, I got hands up. File plan. Could you not put your FOIA exemptions on there? Make it really simple. You should have file plans. And when you're unsure, check with your agency records officer. Check with your security officer. If classified records are transferred in unclassified series, it's a security violation. We don't commingle our classified and unclassified. It's just like when you send boxes to the record center, you don't mix temporary with varying retention periods, and you definitely don't mix temporary with permanent. If a proper folder level box list is not accompanying the permanent transfer, you're going to need to create one. Remember, it's my agency, the National Archives, well, not mine personally, it's the agency I work for. It's the National Archives' responsibility to promote access to records. That's our mission, to make records available. That being said, we understand that some records are still sensitive, and we will honor those sensitivities when they're documented appropriately. Once they're transferred, NARA is not going to consult with the agency except for classified records. All releases are at NARA's discretion, and NARA does not make any kind of separate access agreements. It costs taxpayer monies. If an agency sends 200 cubic feet of records to NARA that are mixed with classified records, it's up to the agency's responsibility to separate them. And everybody in here is a taxpayer, and everybody in here, your agency receives monies from the tax base. So if you classify everything or stamp everything restricted, it's going to take extra time either on your agency side or on my agency side to go through and clean things up. We're wasting our own money. Do it right the first time. Don't want to waste taxpayer dollars. Okay, so show of hands. How many people feel they have a better understanding of access restrictions and the need to be adamant about the process when you go through to transfer records? To make sure that you're documenting them correctly. Okay, some of you folks have given up on me, but that's okay. Not as many hands as we used to have. I'm now going to turn the briefing over to Jack Cabral. He's going to briefly show us some components within the Electronic Records Archives for when we do TRs. Jack?
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I'm not on mute, I hope. No, I'm not. Very good. Awesome, Michael. Thank you for that presentation. It's very good. Yes, not that I'm an expert at ERA, because I'm not. That's not my field, but it does come up, obviously, when we want to transfer or when the National Archives is accessioning those records from the Records Center into the archives themselves. It used to be where we filled out an old 258. Now we must go through ERA, which is the Electronic Record Archive, and our 258 is now what we would call a TR, which would be a transfer request, right? So that being the case, we have a slide up here that gives you an idea, and I'm going to share my desktop with you, okay? So don't everybody freak out by sharing it. I kind of have control of your computer. What the difference between classified and access restriction means. Classified usually means the national security type records, right? Those types of classified records, the ones that would be referring to confidential or secret or top secret, right? That would be considered your classified records. And then you would have the access restricted records. And the second key term is access restricted. It's unclassified but sensitive records, right? And I know somebody in the chat box had chatted a little bit about those sensitive records. And it would be controlled unclassified information, which would be CUI. And that would be things that Michael was chatting about and mentioning with FOIA, right? Personally identifiable information, confidential business information, CBI stuff, right? Law enforcement, banking information, statutory, and records of concern. So just to clarify that, I just wanted to mention that before we got into some slides of PowerPoint, PDF slides of ERA that I wanted to show you. So here what you have is basically a larger version of the slide that you have as part of our presentation today. And this comes from the ERA manual, which I will give you the links to in a brief bit, and I will show you how to access ERA information. And what's going to happen is when you're sitting at your desk and you realize that a notice comes through saying that you have records that are stored in the Federal Records Center that are permanent, that now have to go be transferred into or accessioned into the National Archives. You will have to go into ERA and you will have to identify those records, and you will come across a screen like this that'll have access restriction on it. And this screen is based on the information that we're giving here today. And that information will have, you'll come up with this screen, and it'll have a drop-down menu right here that'll have access restriction status, right? Now you have a few statuses that you could possibly have from that drop-down menu. One would be fully, right? All those records in the transfer are restricted. That's fully accessed or fully restricted. Then you have partly restricted, which are some records in the transfer are restricted, and possibly restricted, which means some records in the transfer may be restricted. Okay, these are transferring records from the Record Center into the National Archives. So then it'll come up with, if you pick any of the top three, the fully, partly, or possibly, then you will have a screen will pop up, and that will be specific access restrictions. So it's asking for more information. Each time it asks for more information. So here you would actually make a selection, and you choose from a list of available options, and you may choose more than one restriction here, which was a question that was in the chat box earlier. And that would be under specific access restrictions, right? And so then if, for this field here, the security classified, that field becomes active when a specific access restriction over here to the left, when you choose that box, is related to a security classification. So if you pick the security classification of confidential, secret, or top secret, right, those classified records that we identified under the key terms, then this box will come up, and it'll ask you which classification you're referring to. And so under here you'll see special markings. Now that box becomes active when you enter a FOIA B1 national security labeling. When you up here, when you see specific access, when it says B1 national security, the special markings box will pop up, and then you'll have to choose from that, and you choose from a list of available options there as well. So, and then the last one here, which would be the statutory citation field, becomes active when FOIA B3, a statute of special access restriction field, is selected. So just so you know that this is what you'll be looking at when you transfer those records from your FRC into the National Archives. You'll have this one section for access restriction. Now I'm just going to, the last thing I will share with you before we move on, because we do want to get to the Q&A part, is the site where you can copy out a manual for yourself, which will have this information for you, as well as screenshots. So if you go to archives.gov, you can get general information that will lead you to the Federal Records Center, the National Archives, or in our case here, Records Management. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now, and we'll finish up with our presentation. But this is just to give you an idea of what will be happening when you get to ERA and the specific access restrictions involved there. So for more information, here are the links here to ERA, to the accessioning records, agency record officers, and ARCIS itself, right? ARCIS is for the 135, for information for the Record Center. And for upcoming briefings, okay, I included ours in here. I didn't have to do that. I guess I didn't change it, right? But here's some of the other information here. We will be having a special box list that will be actually series number 4. Because series number 3 that we have will be for the presidential memoranda, and that will be in May. but that hasn't been decided yet exactly. So that'll be the upcoming briefings. Paulette might want to speak a little bit more about that. Who can help? Your FOIA officer, of course, and your records officer. And then we can also help a special access group here. We have a representative here from Special Access today, David Painter, and he'll be helping out with the Q&A section. So if you do have any specific questions about today's presentation or about your records, David might be able to help you, or he will be able to at the very least point you to the right direction or possibly get back to you with information. And also the permanent record capture team, which Michael has said to you that we are part of, and it's a great team, and we try to get permanent records into the National Archives. So that's our function. So I'll leave it open to Q&A, but thanks everybody for coming.
Carol, that's kind of dependent upon the volume that you have. You might want to do a sampling. If you've got like 300 boxes that are ready to be offered to the National Archives, call back 10%, call back 30 boxes, or call back 5 boxes. If all 5 boxes look perfect and match up to your box list, then you probably should be good to go. If you've got some problems, then you may want to, over time, go back and try and clean things up. Okay, ERA is used for access restriction records. It's used for all records being sent to the National Archives, and ARCIS is the 135, yes.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Jack Cabral and Mr. Michael Bainbridge for their presentation today. It was very informative, and I really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank all of you for signing on today.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this seminar useful. For more information about the U.S. National Records Management Training Program, please visit www.archives.gov. Also, our current workshop schedule for both face-to-face and web-based training is available online at NARA.learn.com.